The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of a letter, thick paper and official seal, stamped from the county registrar's office. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, coffee still steaming, hands trembling as I opened it. The words on the page didn't make sense at first. This notice confirms that property at 117 Hillcrest Lane is no longer listed under your name, as records show no structure exists on this parcel. I blinked, reading it twice, then 3 times. No structure? I looked up, my eyes sweeping across the window to the house I had lived in for 15 years, the place where my children had taken their first steps, where I had buried my dog beneath the oak tree. The house was right there, bricks and beams, windows and roof. How could they claim it didn't exist? My first thought was clerical error. Mistakes happen after all. But when I drove down to the county office, they pulled up the digital plat maps and showed me a blank lot. My home erased like it had never been built. My name gone from the system. My stomach dropped to my feet because it wasn't just a mistake. This was intentional, and I knew exactly who was behind it. Karen. HOA Karen, the bloated tyrant who waddled through neighborhood streets like a queen inspecting her kingdom. She was infamous for her petty fines, mailboxes half an inch too tall, shutters not the right shade of beige, grass trimmed on the wrong day. She thrived on intimidation, loved the sight of her neighbors trembling as she dropped violations on their doors. For years she had tried to force me into the HOA despite my house predating its formation, and for years I had refused. My home was exempt by law, grandfathered out. That fact burned her like acid, and she never let me forget it. But this was new. She hadn't just threatened fines. She had gone to the heart of ownership. She had erased me from the books. I dug deeper, demanded paper records, and what I found made my blood boil. Someone had filed forged deeds and backdated demolition permits, claiming my house had been torn down a decade ago. Fake signatures littered the documents. My name scrawled in handwriting that wasn't mine. County stamps crudely replicated. Whoever had done this had access to more than just imagination. They had access to internal connections. And behind all of it, I saw her shadow. Karen wasn't just power-hungry. She was colluding. I confronted her one afternoon as she waddled across her lawn, barking at a teenager about leaving a bicycle on the sidewalk. "Karen?" I snapped, my voice cutting through the summer air. "You erased my house from county records." She turned, feigning confusion. "Oh, don't be ridiculous, Carter. If your name isn't on the books, maybe you don't belong here." The smirk on her face told me everything. She knew. She had orchestrated it. "You can't sell what isn't yours," I growled. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Watch me." That was when I realized the scale of what she was attempting. She wasn't just trying to erase my house, she was preparing to sell my land out from under me. I needed proof. I started keeping a journal, documenting every suspicious move, every letter, every offhand comment she made. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected place. 2 weeks later, I got a knock at my door. It was Malcolm, a young intern from the county recorder's office. He looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot, clutching a brown envelope. "I shouldn't be here," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "But I've seen things. Files being altered, signatures copied. It's her. She has someone inside helping her." My pulse raced as he handed me the envelope. Inside were copies of emails between Karen and a mid-level county clerk, discussing expediting demolition paperwork and fast-tracking parcel resale. My house was listed in those emails as a vacant asset, already earmarked for developers. I thanked him, my hands shaking. This was the smoking gun. Karen wasn't acting alone. She was running a conspiracy. The next HOA meeting was chaos. Karen stood at the podium, dripping arrogance, wagging her finger as she declared new community development plans. She spoke of unused parcels and opportunities for growth. And then she dropped the bomb. My address, listed as available for purchase. Neighbors gasped, some looking confused, others glancing at me. I stood, binder in hand, my voice steady despite the fire inside me. "You're selling my land, my house, while I still live in it." Karen laughed, a booming sound meant to mock. "Oh, please, the county records are clear. That house doesn't exist. Everyone here knows you're clinging to old paperwork." That was my cue. I opened the binder and projected Malcolm's emails onto the screen. The room fell silent as Karen's own words appeared. Promising kickbacks to a clerk. Promising developers land that wasn't hers. Gasps rippled. A neighbor shouted, "Is this real?" Another muttered, "She's been stealing from all of us." Karen's face drained of color, but she tried to recover, barking, "These are fakes. Lies. He's desperate." But then Malcolm himself stepped forward from the back row. His voice trembled but carried clear. "It's true. I saw her documents. I copied these before she could destroy them." She told the clerk to erase his house. The eruption was instant. Neighbors shouted, some rising from their chairs, others yelling for the sheriff. Karen's gavel slammed helplessly, but the power had shifted. She wasn't the queen anymore. She was the criminal in the spotlight. That night, deputies arrived at her doorstep. They seized her computer, her files, her records. She screamed as they dragged her out, her shrill voice echoing across the cul-de-sac. "I am the HOA, you can't do this to me." But she was no longer the HOA, she was a fraud, exposed and unraveling. The night Karen was taken away in cuffs, the neighborhood gathered in hushed clusters beneath porch lights. People whispered in disbelief, voices tinged with both relief and fury. For years, she had been the voice booming through letters, fines, and threats. For years, no one dared challenge her because she wore the mask of authority. Now that mask was ripped away, and what lay beneath was nothing but a thief in cheap pearls. I should have felt triumphant, but what I felt was something heavier, a grief for all the trust she had poisoned, all the lives she had bullied into silence. The county's investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within a week, headlines appeared across local news outlets. HOA president arrested in land fraud scheme. Reporters swarmed the courthouse, their microphones pointed at neighbors who once hid behind curtains when Karen's SUV rolled down the street. Now they spoke freely, telling stories of harassment, extortion, threats. An elderly man admitted Karen had demanded he pay road maintenance fees for a road the county itself maintained. A single mother confessed Karen had threatened to report her to child services because her kids left toys in the yard. Each testimony painted her reign of terror in darker strokes, and each new revelation deepened the community's outrage. The real shock came when investigators cracked into her emails fully. It turned out my house wasn't the first she'd tried to erase. She had already filed false records on 2 vacant lots, claiming demolition where none had taken place, reselling them through shell buyers connected to the same developer. She'd pocketed over $80,000. My home was simply her boldest move yet, her attempt to crown herself queen of the entire cul-de-sac through outright theft. By the time the trial began, Karen's name was infamous. She waddled into the courtroom in a wrinkled suit, shackles clinking at her ankles, her face blotchy from nights in the county jail. Gone was the booming voice, the strut of power. She sat hunched at the defendant's table, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. But the arrogance wasn't entirely gone. You could see it simmering, her lips curling whenever she caught someone's gaze. She still believed she was untouchable. The prosecution dismantled her defense piece by piece. First, they presented the forged deeds. The jury stared at the signatures, side by side with my real signature, the crude forgery obvious even to untrained eyes. Then they brought in Malcolm, the young intern, whose trembling but resolute testimony landed like a hammer blow. "She told the clerk to erase Carter's house," he said, his voice cracking. "She said no one would believe him if the records were gone. She laughed about it." The courtroom gasped, and I saw jurors exchange glances of disgust. Karen's attorney tried to spin the story, claiming Karen had been manipulated by the clerk, that she was simply a well-meaning leader who got caught up in bad advice. But that story crumbled when the developer himself took the stand under subpoena. He admitted to the emails, admitted Karen had promised him land at a fraction of its value, admitted she had even suggested fabricating environmental hazards to drive out stubborn homeowners like me. The jury's faces hardened. This wasn't negligence, it was conspiracy. The twist that no one saw coming arrived on the 6th day of trial. A woman rose from the gallery, thin and pale with tired eyes. She introduced herself as Karen's estranged sister. The judge allowed her testimony after deliberation, and what she revealed chilled the room. "Karen's been doing this since we were kids," she said. She'd change report cards, forge notes from our parents. She always believed if she shouted loud enough, she could rewrite reality. The sister's voice trembled but grew stronger. But this time, she tried to erase a man's home. She tried to erase his family's history, and she thought she could get away with it. She can't. By the time closing arguments rolled around, Karen's fate was sealed. The prosecutor's voice thundered in the quiet courtroom. She erased a man's house from the books while he still lived in it. She tried to sell land that wasn't hers. If that doesn't demand justice, what does? The jury deliberated less than 2 hours. Guilty. On every count. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit grand larceny, and attempted unlawful seizure of property. When the judge read the verdict, Karen's body sagged like her bones had melted, but her mouth still twisted into denial. "You're all against me. This is my community. I built it," she shrieked as deputies pulled her up. But her voice no longer carried power. Carried only shame. The sentence was harsh and fitting. 8 years in state prison, restitution for every fraudulent transaction, and permanent disqualification from serving on any board or association. And then came the blow that crushed what little pride she clung to. Her own home, the one she had lorded over the neighborhood from, was seized by the court to pay damages. The place she had once treated like a palace became a hollow shell, auctioned off to strangers. I stood at the back of the courthouse when the gavel fell, feeling a mix of vindication and sorrow. Vindication because justice had prevailed. Sorrow because it never should have come to this. A woman so consumed by greed had burned down her own life and poisoned a community in the process. But from that wreckage, something beautiful grew. Without Karen's chokehold, the HOA dissolved. Neighbors began organizing potlucks instead of meetings, lending each other tools instead of threatening fines. Kids played basketball in driveways again, laughter echoing where fear once lingered. The cul-de-sac, for the first time in years, felt like a neighborhood instead of a prison. One evening, not long after the trial ended, I walked the edge of my property where Karen had first spliced into the system. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold, and I thought of my father's words, "Land isn't just dirt, son. It's memory. Protect it." Against impossible odds, and in doing so, I hadn't just saved my house, I'd saved my neighbors too. Sometimes people still ask me if I regret pushing as hard as I did. If maybe I should have just ignored her, let her game slide, avoided the storm. But when I see my kids playing in the yard of the home Karen tried to erase, when I hear neighbors laughing instead of whispering, I know the answer. So I'll ask you, if someone tried to erase your home from the map, to sell your history as if it were theirs, would you fight back? Or would you stay silent and hope it passed? Was I right to drag Karen all the way into the light, even if it cost her everything? Share your thoughts because silence lets tyrants thrive, but truth builds legacies that last.